I find the abstractions to be unnecessary.
Hmm.
I find that the APIs that the foundation models have exposed around like tool use and structured output and everything are kind of sufficiently high level that I'm not getting a lot of value from the agentic frameworks.
Welcome, AI Tinkerers. This is our global stage where we take people who are doing interesting stuff in Gen AI and we look under the hood of their side projects and their main projects. We try to get the snippets and the code snippets and things that will enable you in your projects. And today I am excited because we're here with Steve Krenzel of Logic Inc. And Steve is someone I've known for over 10 years who's done incredible things. And early in my generative AI journey, this is pre-ChatGPT, catching up with Steve and realizing that he was so deep in, he was doing stuff that didn't have names like RAG yet or agentic workflows. And he was doing it in the context of bigger companies. He's worked at Salesforce, he's worked at Brex, he's worked at Twitter and more. And I'm so happy to have you. Steve, welcome.
Thank you, Joe. It's awesome to be here.
Tell us about Logic first and what it does, and then we'll dive under the hood a little bit.
Yeah. So Logic is all about putting intelligence to work. It's about taking this like new superpower that humanity has, which is intelligence on demand, and making it easy to apply that either to like internal operational workflows or to product features you might be building.
And that's a super high level that could apply to anything, but like, where did you, what is, and I know you're a 9-month-old company. So
9-month-old company, 4 people funded, soon to be 6 people. We have 2 engineers joining.
Oh, awesome.
Specifically, you give us a document like an SOP or PRD, some kind of description of a business process.
Okay.
Give us that document. A couple of seconds later, we'll give you an API that implements that document.
So
that's it.
That's very high level vision. So it's like SOP in and
API out.
We handle the rest. Here's an API.
Yeah,
that's
well-typed. Cool. It's a well-typed API
cool.
with backtesting, documentation, everything you need to start integrating with it.
Okay. And so today that could be anything.
Yes.
Can it be anything?
So there are some constraints. Like it's very, we're not kind of doing any like multi-step agentic workflows. We're not interacting with external yet. So it's very transactional in that you give us data that you want us to reason about or somehow interpret. We give you data back.
What is a killer use case today? Like something someone's using, like are people using it now? You ever like,
So to be proud, we have a number of customers we're working with. In fact, I think we ended December completing about 145,000 tasks for our customers.
What is a task? Like how big is a task?
A task might be like moderating an item for like an e-commerce platform. So like some inventory item comes in and they need like standardized titles,
like
standardized
a review,
colors.
So some e-commerce store has like a data feed of like from their supplier.
They ingest inventory from third parties.
A couple of them come with all caps and it's like,
or there might be like rogue HTML tags in them or random phone numbers in them. And so like,
and so today, if I wanted to automate that, I would have to, I have humans doing it. And I'm like, no, we use AI. So today I would have to build an entire stack for my Gen AI data pipeline. And then I'd have to use it and I have to test it. I have to create evals. I have to do all this stuff. And then I could solve that. Like, we can moderate our content now, that one task.
Exactly.
And then I can do that over and over again for my top 10 tasks. I can rank them. Probably Accenture's probably collecting so much money doing this right now. And then you're saying like, no. You've already got a well-developed SOP.
Yeah.
Paste it in. Is that?
That's exactly it. And
can you show us? Like, okay.
Yeah. To really make that concrete, that specific customer that I'm thinking of right now, they gave us an SOP that they've been using for about 9 years. They've had a team of 4 humans kind of working off that SOP.
Okay.
We were able to put that in our system and immediately start automating portions of the workflow. And so like this kind of battle tested on really old SOPs that existed way before LLMs.
Does your system also figure out like, hey, here's what I'm good at, what I still need the human to help me on?
Yeah. So depending on how you phrase the SOP, you can kind of ask for confidence scores on things. And like, if you're moderating, say, messages between humans, which is like user-generated content moderation is another use case, you can say like, should I escalate to a human because this is too ambiguous for me to handle? Yeah, absolutely.
Can you show us a real use of it? Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it'd be fun to actually just generate an SOP on demand. And so I'm just gonna have Claude write an SOP for kind of taking in biographical information about a podcast guest and then outputting interesting questions for that guest.
Okay.
And so this is an SOP that our system obviously has never seen before, being generated on demand by Claude. And there will be nothing LLM specific in this. So there will be no chain of thought. There will be no few shot examples. It's just going to be pretty.
The SOP doesn't have that, right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And when you give that to our system behind the scenes, we'll provide all of that. Like we do a bunch of prompt rewriting.
Got it.
But let me just get this into Logic.
Yeah, cool.
And so let's see. Sharing podcast interview. Let's call it for guest.
Cool.
We'll publish this. And so that, as an end user, that's kind of all you need to give us. From here, we take it from here. So we'll do the prompt rewriting to make this more friendly for LLMs. As part of this process, we infer a schema for this process. So we'll figure out like, oh, what are the inputs needed to run this? What outputs are you expecting for it? We'll generate test cases for it, so that you can have confidence that like our system's doing what you expect it to do. We'll generate integration docs.
And generate podcast interviews is going to generate like stuff to prep the host, like bio information, and then like questions that we could ask and things like that.
Right. So imagine you were making like a little like mobile app where you just wanted to quickly enter some details about your guest and get back a set of questions.
Okay. And so the inputs would be like the name or something. And
And so the schema that our system inferred was like a quick biography on the guest, any kind of public things they published, profiles, and maybe some previous interview appearances. And then our system will return a list that follows this output schema.
Cool.
And I can show.
So it looks like you're generating schema, you're generating tests.
Yeah, generating tests. And the number of tests that we generate we kind of leave it up to the LLM. Sometimes we'll generate 30 tests. Sometimes we'll generate, in this case, 1 test.
Cool.
And
then it gives you an
endpoint. We also give you integration docs for your engineering team.
Wow.
And so in this, we'll show you the actual schema that we're using behind the scenes. All of the examples in here are dynamically generated for your process. And we give you
developer docs and with libraries. That's so cool.
Yeah, like code examples. So if you you can just take this example, we can hop over to our terminal, paste this in.
It's like that whole meme of service as a software. Not really a meme, it's a real thing, but like you could just like paste it in and start a company. Put this on a URL.
That's the dream.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really interesting. And so, but practically speaking, as a developer, then now I have an endpoint for moderating, and I'm gonna have to look at the schema, but it's like I have inputs like name or whatever, and then I have outputs like the bio and questions. So I call that API. That's what I get. I get that in out, but it's following my SOP, and then it's got this platform behind it to like that I can go inspect. And can I see like what, like, are there evals built in? How do I understand as a user of this?
Yeah. So let me show you. Let's do. I'll just hop over to we have a welcome doc that is like a goofy, like you give us a movie title and we give you back emoji. Let me make this bigger.
Yeah.
And so like these test cases, like, so every time you change your document, we will read derive we call them the artifacts. So the schemas, the test cases, the integration docs.
Sure.
And we'll rerun these test cases. And so you can see, from like an eval perspective, the input for this test case is frozen. The expected output is this. The actual output is different, but the test still passes. And we have the LLM explain why it passes, because both sequences validly represent the movie Frozen. The actual result includes an additional, but it's fine. And so we actually, as part of our eval framework, like if this were to fail, the LLM would say why it believes it should fail. So it's not like exact matching.
Right. Which you have, that's the definition of Gen AI evals right there, is you have to fuzzy match.
And so there's this kind of like fuzzy matching. We also do like history.
Okay.
This
if I was changing my SOP, I mean the test could change radically. It depends on the change of the SOP.
Yeah.
So does that mean just sort of like the history could be more or less relevant, I guess?
That's right. And so when we get into, like, part of the things we'll do is like we'll pull few shot examples from history that we've seen, but we kind of scope that down to a specific version of your document because those inputs or the semantics might change between versions.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Can you take us under the hood? Like, I know you've done AI in production at scale and some pretty innovative stuff. Like, is there something in this system that you would be willing to share with the audience of tinkerers that you think was kind of a hard-earned, less or trick or something? Could be even an prompt engineering technique or something. I know you're full of these every time we talk. I get them. The
Yes,
nuggets.
yeah.
Give us the nuggets, Steve.
That's a tricky thing to do on demand. The Let's see. I'll say I don't know if I might have mentioned this earlier, but one thing that we've found we've gotten a lot of value from is when we generate our schemas,
Mhm.
we do a number of things. Like we always ensure that there's a description for every field. We find that this meaningfully helps guide the LLM's output.
Sure.
We also always provide both the input schema and the output schema to the LLM. That's good for general guidance.
When are you running the LLM after this initial run to generate all this stuff? Like when are you feeding it back in? Every time the SOP runs.
Every single time we run the SOP.
You do the full input and output with all the descriptions of each
Yeah.
stuff.
So the
Makes sense.
prompts that we generate behind the scenes are actually fairly large.
It sounds like it. I was going to ask, like, what model do you need to use? Like, do you need Claude for this minimum, or
Yeah.
I guess OpenAI is giving you 128K now, right?
Yeah. And and generally we're much smaller than that, but like
Okay.
low tens of thousands of tokens, or like 5 to 10,000 tokens. We have some.
Do you have a feel for speed implication of? So first of all, I'm really curious about speed.
Yeah.
How it relates to prompt size, but
Yeah.
also complexity. Like if you're asking it to think step by step and do more chain of thought, advanced stuff in there, does it get slower? I know for the reasoning models, it certainly does, but for base models, does it?
No. So the size of your input won't have too much of an impact on the latency, like time to first token. Most of your latency is going to come from how many tokens you're
I'm generating.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that just has to do with the like encoder decoder architecture of modern LLMs. All the efforts kind of in the decoding side.
Okay. And then what do you see runtime performance versus across the different models right now? Do you use different models like Llama 3? Do you use any fine tune for speed? Are you into that at all yet?
Yeah. So right now we exclusively call out to OpenAI. So we're kind of in the OpenAI family of models.
Okay.
Most of that's just because we really optimize for quality over latency or even over cost.
Got it.
It's really important to us that you can run a process 1,000,000 times and without a human in the loop and have it work.
So you just want one really smart model that you can rely on and get to know really well, and
Yes.
you're not going to optimize.
And we have just started dabbling with multimodal support, not to be confused with multimodal support. And both within the OpenAI family of language models like GPT-4o mini versus GPT-4o, where we'll dynamically choose between the two. But we're also starting to look at like calling out to Gemini for some use cases.
What draws you to Gemini?
The first thing that really drew us a couple months ago were their embeddings. They just have really great embeddings, at least from our testing. And we're starting to do more and more with semantic retrieval and semantic clustering, and so they had a really good embedding showing. But then most recently,
What's good about it? Just the quality.
Yeah, embeddings are kind of this fuzzy, nebulous array of vectors, but for our use cases, we just found them to be
more relevant retrieval.
Yeah.
Interesting. And you tested that pretty rigorously?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that kind of first got Gemini or the whole Google AI offering on our radar. But then recently, all of their Gemini announcements around their models have just been really, really impressive.
Have you played with the prompt caching or code execution? They have code execution. People don't understand this, but like in one shot, they'll generate and run the code, not just give you the tool.
So we don't do any code execution, but we use prompt caching extensively. And in fact, I guess this is another trick, like or like a tip for people building on LLMs. Structure your prompts so that they're append-only. So a lot of people will use like a template library to like have this prompt, and then they'll kind of templatize names or data within the middle of the prompt. Don't do that. Describe the process that you want to happen, and then and as part of it, describe the input data, and then append your data to the end.
So the attention, in the beginning and the end of a prompt is classically more, paid attention to.
Sure.
And so my worry is like by taking the really important parts, the variables, and putting them at the very end, are you losing anything there? And have you tested that?
Yeah.
I get the implication for caching is super.
Yeah.
But that's why you're doing it, right?
It's motivated by caching. We between any two calls to the LLM, we try to maximize the prefix that we send to the LLM,
just so that you can benefit from caching.
Yeah, maximize the shared prefix, and and as a consequence, maximize caching.
Okay. But you're not
didn't.
finding a quality trade-off by doing this technique.
No, I especially by appending the inputs to the end, I think that's fine in terms of like not getting lost kind of in the middle of things. Yeah.
And it won't have any effect on chain of thought because you can still ask it to sequence its output in the chain of thought
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Although the way we do chain of thought is also interesting. We rely heavily on structured output for chain of thought. Like structured output, structured output is probably one of the most underutilized tools that when people think about how to improve the output of an LLM, in that like a lot of people think of structured output as just like a nice way to like JSON parse, a response and just get like fields that they were expecting. But the really neat thing with structured output is you actually get to guide and force the LLM to go in certain directions. And so like for a chain of thought, your output schema, if you're using structured output, you can say like analysis and then conclusion. And like in your analysis, you can instruct it to do its thinking. And the structured output will guarantee that the fields that get generated will be in the same order that you define them in the schema. So by forcing the analysis to be generated before the conclusion, you force the LLM to do things in a certain order. One of the really cool things you can do with that is if you really want the LLM to go deep, your chain of thought can start with like an initial thought, and then you can say like, okay, revised thought. Okay, revised thought 2, revised thought 3. And you can if you want the LLM to have to like think about its answer for say 20 steps, you can force that just by specifying a schema that forces it to think about that for 20.
You literally can't skip it because it's forced in the schema,
right.
And that's part
and
of
like one interesting example, can
you show us any of these prompts? Like an example of either the backloading your variables prompt, like from your code?
Yeah.
Cool
well, first let me show you like, so in Logic, we have like one of our documents that we use is like, we just send it a raw diff from Git, and then we have it comment on all of these different fields. So like code complexity, naming conventions, code organization, testing, so forth. And
so wait, this is a logic flow that you've built for analyzing code.
Yeah.
And then you're using it. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. So we build Logic with Logic.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really cool.
And if we hop into some of our test cases,
will you expose these recipes into a marketplace or something eventually?
Yes. Yeah. We're like a template library is on our radar for sure.
Because you could create just a project for that.
Yes.
Just related to coding. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And so because we rely on structured output, even if the LLM has
this is awesome.
Has
and
like
find security vulnerabilities, just constantly monitor the stuff that would be too arduous to do.
Yeah. And so even if the LLM has nothing of importance to say on a topic, we still force it to say like, nothing significant here.
Sure.
So I'll show you.
Just like a Japanese train platform operator, they have to do the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
It's checklists.
Yeah. One of the cool things with Logic is like, if we have an idea of like, if we just want something powered by an LLM, it's lightweight enough now that we just kind of do it. Like if like our team doesn't write Git commit messages anymore. So I think, so like if I just run, actually, let me do no verify because I don't want to run like our linter and everything.
Cool.
You'll see Logic is writing your Git commit message.
Oh,
so
wow.
we just took this diff, sending up the Logic right now, and in a few seconds, we'll get back. So I'm working on our handling middleware. And if you look, one of the really cool things with this is like, if you look at our actual commits, everybody has standardized commits. So like if I look at the description of this, you'll see we always have like a top level summary, bullets of what happened, and all of our commits are standardized.
That's so cool.
And so we don't have any just like work in progress commits or any low value commits.
At the end of the quarter, you can have it do your quarterly reviews too.
Yeah. So I do at the end of the month, I actually give it our Git log. I have a different workflow that gives us our Git log and summarizes like everything that we did.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But you asked for an actual example of, let me show you one of my fun bots that I actually published 2 years ago is my Pick'ems bot that picks teams in the ESPN's Pick'ems game. And actually need to I modified the bot for this year, but I didn't publish it yet.
Did you present this at AI Tinkerers once?
I did. An early, like this, I think the second AI Tinkers event in Seattle, I presented this.
So it was a couple of years ago, and then you okay, and so you've kept it going. You've collected a lot of data, and now you've made improvements.
Yeah, and so the first year that I ran this, it was in the top 15% of all people on ESPN.
Wow.
This year it was in the top 5%. And let me show you our uh, chain of thought prompt. So you can actually see, we have like this, actually, let me make this much bigger. So we have this thought schema that is like, reflect on your current approach, give it an award, and then determine a next step. Like, do you want to continue down this line of thought? Do you want to adjust it, or do you want to backtrack it? And then in our actual schema, so our final schema has an analysis and a conclusion, like I mentioned before. But if you look at our analysis schema, you'll see initial thought, revised thought, revised thought, revised thought, and then final reflection. So we actually force the LLM to keep thinking and keep revising. And if you look at the output, you'll see be like, oh yeah, like this line of thinking is good, so I'm going to continue with it. Oh yeah, and you can actually get a sense of its certainty in its decision based on how many times it continues versus adjust versus backtrack.
Yeah, very cool. And this is open source.
Yeah,
this would be a great repo for anyone to study just on prompt engineering. Honestly, to look at the code and
yeah, for sure. And this is I'll just kick this off. So like it's fully autonomous. It just like pops up on ESPN. It'll start crawling news articles. It'll figure out what matches are in play. We're just past the regular season right now, so it won't do anything too interesting.
I never told you this before. My first job, computer science grad, straight into ESPN.com, fantasy games team, built the live draft Java applet. But I know some people are still working there who can actually, I can put this on their radar.
Funny. I didn't know that.
No, yeah.
And so now it'll kind of go through a bunch of different articles. The prompt is long enough now that it takes a couple minutes to run through everything, but you can see
initial thought,
at least for this analyzing the article.
Can I read a couple of these? So like article focused on Kansas City Chiefs, primarily Travis Kelce's comments. And then here it's like, it looks like it's repeating. No, it looks like it ran out of revision thoughts. It just sort of, you've tapped out the intelligence of this guy.
Right. So so, and for the news analysis, it tends to be pretty straightforward, because all we're asking it to do for the news analysis is determine, like, is this for fantasy, is this for college, or is this for NFL? So it tends to get to the conclusion pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
But when it gets,
are you doing a one shot of like grab all the news and then just do this chain of thought, or do you cycle back and go, look, because you could ideate questions, then go back to the web and get more answers, right?
Yeah. No, it's a fixed workflow.
Okay.
Where we hop on like ESPN's news article, like the main news site, we grab the like top 20 headlines or something, and then we kind of fan that out into a bunch of parallel analysis. And we have, let's see, I'd call them, in this repo, I'd call them tools. But let me make this bigger. We have a news analyst tool, which is just, basically figure out, is this related to the NFL or not? And we filter out anything that's not related to the NFL.
Okay.
And then we have the predict the winner tool, where we actually give it the matchups. We inject the article summaries, and then we have it choose the winning team. And the way we structure our prompts, like for the winner tool, we actually, like, this is the schema that we define for that tool. We unconditionally wrap these schemas in that chain of thought schema that I showed you earlier. So like the complexity of that whole chain of thought process is just kind of confined to one file. And then anywhere else we call the LLM, we just unconditionally wrap this new schema in that super complex schema.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So you don't have to like, we're going to let it over. Yeah. Are you using any frameworks for like the execution of these workflows? Or is it just homegrown for this repo?
Homegrown for this repo.
Have you tried any agentic tool like Crude AI, LangGraph, et cetera?
Yeah, especially at Brex, I spent a bunch of time with LangGraph. And this was, the summer of 23. So everything was super nascent, but some time with Llama Index, dabbled briefly with Crew. I was just looking at the small agents thing that Hugging Face released. I don't know.
What were your conclusions after looking at those others in that one?
I don't know if I find the abstractions to be unnecessary. I find that the APIs that the foundation models have exposed around like tool use and structured output and everything are kind of sufficiently high level that I'm not getting a lot of value from the agentic frameworks.
Sure. Do you ever worry that as base models get better, that using a framework might hold you back?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you're kind of forced to use whatever abstractions that framework gives you. And I guess from a certain lens, you could argue that framework will abstract away the nuances between different models. But at least for the things that I'm doing, I want to be a little bit closer to where the foundation models are.
I think all of the last 2 years, certainly everyone I talked to said, yeah, of course I've experimented with different models coming out because it's fun and interesting, but yeah, I'm using GPT-4 for everything because I want the best quality. I don't care about cost right now, whatever. Do you think in 2025, I think the two forces are going to be actual alternatives that are good quality on different aspects, or speed, performance needs as we get these systems scaled? Or it could be like the finally differentiated features that are being baked in, like I mentioned, Gemini has code execution baked in, or grounding. I mean, Google's pretty good at search. I think their grounding's probably pretty good. I've played with it, pretty game changing. If you need to bring in data, you can probably rip out a lot of code, just use grounding, but that's going to tie you to Gemini to some extent, right? Do you think this year we're going to see that similarly the agentic frameworks actually provide enough value where you're like, yeah, I'm not going to, there's so much value. Like your alternative answer could be, yeah, there's so much value in these agentic platforms that you'd be dumb not to use them. I haven't heard a single person say that. When will we hear that?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know that we may never hear that. But
Because
it seems like everybody quickly reaches feature parity as soon as one, like Gemini, OpenAI, Anthropic, I guess AWS is trying to throw in with Nova now.
Got it. So that force that might bring you is not going to be a problem because they'll just parity it.
And it's very similar to, adjacent, but like we have and this was true at Brex as well, but like we have a policy of no fine tuning, which is kind of controversial.
Yeah.
Or it can be controversial in some circles.
My next guests are only in on fine tuning.
Yes. Yeah. So just as a matter of policy, there's tons of reasons, but the big ones are for logic one, the user experience we're trying to give to a user where they give us a document and we give them back an API seconds later that works. We just don't have any data to fine tune on. Like there's nothing to fine tune on. We just need that to work out of the gate.
Wait, you can fine tune on the interim steps of like, how do you go from this to an API spec and whatever, right? Or a schema, right? You could fine tune on that stuff.
The internal workflows that we do to derive artifacts, certainly we could fine tune.
But you're saying,
but we still don't
do that because it's an optimization. We're too young to optimize. Is that the driver?
Partially. You could fine tune on very narrow specific.
Well, what is your reason to not fine tune when you're?
So like you risk commingling data. So like if you're going to fine tune, you really want to fine tune on high quality synthetic data, because especially if you're dealing with customer data, you don't want it to accidentally be regurgitated.
You have concerns about incorporating data that can be leaked,
right? So then you need like good synthetic data,
and you lose visibility once you've fine tuned.
Right. Once you fine tune on a piece of data, you never know how that will be used or surfaced again.
Right.
But the bigger thing, or maybe the biggest thing for us, is typically models that you can fine tune tend to be a couple months behind the kind of the state of the art.
Makes sense.
So like when 3.5 Turbo came out, you couldn't fine tune it for like until like 6 months after it came out, and then every day. So if you want to be at the bleeding edge, but also if you want to do like any kind of A/B testing between prompts, you need to be able to just like dynamically call out to different models. And then maybe this is actually the real high order bit, the inner loop, like your dev inner loop just becomes so much slower, because every time you change your prompt, you now need to, rerun the fine tuning process.
I see.
And now you're kind of in the previous era of like classical data science models where like you make some tweaks and then you go, it's like, oh, it's compiling.
Throw it over the wall.
It's fine-tuning.
Wait for those, other team to like finish their workflow to finish.
So I don't know if there's any individual like killer reason why.
Okay. It sounds like the strategy reason for now would be like that you're then latching onto foundation models that are behind the curve, and you're picking up this operational dev maintenance task that slows you down.
Yeah.
And you need
just a bunch of paper
velocity
tasks.
matters. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Those are strong arguments. Okay, interesting. So, all right, thanks for showing us
Yeah.
this. And so the performance went this year to what?
Oh, top 5%.
Okay.
And yeah. And so let's see if we can, well, maybe it's not worth.
Doesn't that, I don't know about the ESPN. I'm not
Yeah.
up on it, but like, aren't there marketplaces where if you're top 5%, you can make some money? Like
Maybe I'm not
teams?
a sports gambler. I'm not even, so here's the funny thing. I'm not even really a sports person. Like,
But
one of the
data
things,
is amazing in sports.
one of the things I literally just learned is that they play football on Christmas. And so typically I run this bot on Thursdays because I wanted to have like the latest news. And Christmas was on a Wednesday this year. And so there were just 3 games that I didn't put any picks in for because I didn't know football was played on Christmas. Because that's that, but that kind of conveys how little I know about football. But I was still top 5% of all players. So.
That's amazing. Oh, that's really cool. Okay.
Um,
Really cool. Well, maybe we could turn so we talked about logic, I just want to go the high level. So SOP to an API. In the interim, you do schemas, you generate the test, you run it. There's some visibility you may give people who are using it. Now they're using it, they can modify it and tweak it, and you're keeping things up to date. The next logical thing would be like, not only do I give you my SOP and my data, but I give you tools and I give you my APIs, and now maybe you can do some work for me. And that's got to be coming, right? That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And
then you could provide tools too.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's lots of things that I might want to do that are like all this browser use stuff is interesting, but at the end of the day, like there's a lot of work there to get over CAPTCHAs and to make it scale. And like, if you incorporated that into here, so my SOP needs a human to use a browser, that's like all of my SOPs.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you could actually use that tool internally. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And so we're starting to get into some of that, like third, the broader umbrella is like third-party integrations, but we call it tools and triggers. So like external systems that can trigger a document, and then external systems that a document can interact with. And so that could be anything from Slack to browsing the web. We just started doing some, like, if you give us URLs that match certain media types like PDFs or images, we'll crawl those and we'll incorporate those.
Is that just context. On the SOP creation side, or is that also on the API usage side?
On the input side, yeah.
Okay,
so if you send us a link to a PDF, we'll crawl it.
Okay, because I get a stream of like invoices, PDFs that are coming in.
Exactly.
I need this SOP. Okay.
Yeah, so like email thread, specifically invoice, like invoice email threads is something that we work with somebody on doing.
Okay. Yeah, I guess email threads is a good. Invoices and PDFs is a good. What are some of those other buckets? Video, social media, data,
and like one of the interesting use cases that somebody is using us for is forensics analysis on fraudulent invoices. So giving us like a new invoice and then historical invoices, and they have like a list of tells that they look for.
Oh, that's so cool.
And that was a.
I've run of that SOP in an e-commerce business, and it's specifically with chargebacks.
Yeah.
And fighting the chargeback. You have to gather data, do some forensics, and then if you present it, you can get the money.
Yeah.
And as a vendor, if you lose that, you're going to lose $50 as a fee. So they're doubly expensive. You've already lost the product.
Yeah.
You're never going to see the money, but then you have to pay this chargeback fee on top of that. So to me, it's just a data problem, because if you can gather enough of this other corroborating data that this person scammed you, then the credit company might side with you. But it's very specialized work, and it's kind of irregular.
Right. And specialized nature of the work. Also, like the threat landscape can change fairly rapidly. And the partner that we're working with this on, they had their engineering team build something in-house that worked quite well. But their frustration with it was that their fraud ops team, who are the actual experts in how money moves around the world, would have to schedule with engineering every time they wanted to update that process, because like all this was checked in the code and managed in code. And so we allow them to do like an inversion of control where the fraud ops team can now just update the document. We'll run the back test for them. And when they're confident that it won't break anything, just publish it and it goes live.
We have talked a lot about prompt engineering and within the context of the product and the side project. You actually wrote the prompt engineering guide while you were at Brex. It became quite popular, right? Could you show people that? Yeah. And just quickly give them a quick overview. I want people to see this resource and have it in case they haven't seen it before. Yeah. So tell us the backstory.
So the backstory is it was early 2023. LLMs were just kind of becoming hot on the scene, and we basically fell on me. I ran a team at Brex called the Office of the CTO, and it fell on me to kind of get our 600 engineers to be thinking about LLMs and how to work with them reliably, and what did they do, what can't they do. and I have a bit of a history in NLP and language modeling, and so I just kind of did a massive brain dump of everything I knew about language modeling at that point in time.
Yeah, that's really cool. And what are like, how has this evolved? Like versus 2 years ago, what in here is still relevant? What isn't?
Yeah, so I haven't looked at this for a minute, and it's interesting seeing the 2-year timestamp. I mean, if you want the first section, I think it should be like required reading for anybody working with LLMs. Like
Okay.
knowing the history of
Yeah.
how we got to where we are
Sure.
is
Interesting.
important. It will actually
Yeah.
be really good for your mental model of
Yeah.
why certain things work well and
Uh-huh.
why not. I'm just going to skim through this. Hidden prompts are still very much a big. Well, now we would call them a system prompt, but like not one of the things I warn a lot in here is like don't embed secrets in your system prompt.
Right.
Anything that the LLM sees, you should assume the user will
Right.
see. That still holds true. Jailbreaks are still very much a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but
Do
yeah.
you find yourself, I mean, the tricky thing with secrets is like sometimes that secret context is necessary to get a good answer, but I don't want to share the secret context in my answer. So how do you get around that? Is it, I mean, beyond prompt engineering, I've done things with like, for example, emails. I go, great, I'm just going to filter my output. This is post LLM to just obfuscate emails just in case.
Yeah.
Are there
So
things like that that you've learned in your toolkit? Because, right, that you can't just say no secrets in a RAG application, right? It's,
well, you shouldn't give the LLM anything you don't want the user to see.
but
And
for example, like I might be matching job candidates with jobs and I got the full bio to make a good match, but like when I give it to my user, I only want to give them the teaser. Like,
yeah,
how do I do my application and follow your
that's
rule?
fair. Okay, yeah, yeah. Then that's tricky because when we refer to like secrets in your prompt, there's like concerns about foundation models training on those secrets, which is one concern, and then there's concerns
Sure.
about leaking the secrets to the user,
Yes.
and solely concerned with the second camp. Um, in that specific case, so the strategy will vary from case to case.
Mhm.
In your specific scenario, I would probably rely on structured output to kind of force the LLM to maybe only output the title of a job, and then make sure that that title is kind of in your set of titles or whatever information you're comfortable
Interesting.
giving
Yeah.
the user. Force the LLM to only output that.
And that can't be prompt engineered by the end user, like prompt injected to like work around because the structured output does a good job of
Well, the structured out
keeping it track.
will mandate that it outputs a title of or in this scenario a title of some sort, and then it would fall on you kind of post processing and making sure that job title actually exists in your
I
set of
see.
job titles. Um,
Okay. That way a user is not like, hey, it's April 1st and all the job titles are now people's email address.
right. I would never expose like free form text to like generated free
Yeah.
form text to
Yeah.
the user,
Yeah.
and I know that that's a hard constraint. If you need to do that, you need to start looking at like guardrail models,
Okay.
and
You think that's still true in 2025?
absolutely,
Interesting. Why?
yeah.
Where have you been burned?
Fortunately, I mean, I tread carefully enough that I haven't been burned
Okay.
recently, but I would
But in
be
your testing, you've been burned. In
terrified.
testing, you've seen the danger.
Yeah.
Interesting. Where in this prompt engineering guide, where do you think is beyond that one? What else is relevant still?
Yeah. So, giving the bot a fish, which is like today in context learning, give it as much context as you possibly can. The more you tell it, the better it'll
Sure.
do. Semantic search has come so far since this post, which is kind of neat.
Mhm.
Command grammars. Today we have like code execution built into Gemini, so this might be less relevant. But if you want it to, and we have like function calling now too. This was written before we had tool use,
Mhm.
and so this was just a pattern that we found to give us the ability to use tools. Um,
Mhm.
let's see, various ways of embedding data. I think a lot of this still applies. Like you
Mhm.
always structure your prompts in. We find Markdown works really, really well.
Mhm.
Different foundation models will be a little different. Like Anthropic, you might want to
Mhm.
use more XML tags. OpenAI, you might want to be a little more JSON heavy. But generally, if you're writing the meat of your prompt in Markdown,
Mhm.
it'll be really happy with that.
Mhm.
There's just a ton of training data, especially from GitHub, written in Markdown,
Okay.
and that includes like tabular information. You want to use tables. Like LLMs will do really, really well with tables. If
Mhm.
you have a really large table, I need to validate this. I haven't validated this in a minute, but you used to have a problem where the headers of the table, it might lose context if you had a very long table. And so in those scenarios, you might want to be more verbose and have like JSON blobs where the field is repeated over and over and over again. So you get that locality. But the way you embed data in your prompts, the higher takeaway from this is like think about the way you embed your data in your prompts. That it makes a big difference.
You've reminded me of one of the biggest constraints right now that I think all the model providers give us, which is even if the context input could be fairly large, the output's not, right? You're pretty limited there. And in an SOP where we can do anything, you've got to have cases where the end report is going to exceed 7,000 tokens or whatever.
Yes.
Like, what do you do in that case? Because does that imply a complete refactoring of your prompt? Because now you're talking by definition of workflow to actually assemble something that's longer than any one run, right?
Yeah. So in that scenario,
What's that?
you would break up the process into smaller like sub processes.
How do you keep it coherent? Because writing a report and asking it to do the intro and later the conclusion doesn't always result in a coherent.
Yeah. Fortunately, I mean, the output context, I believe for GPT-4o right now is around 16,000 tokens, 16,384.
Okay.
It's a good chunk of space.
Yeah.
And we haven't ran into any production issues where it's been a problem.
Okay.
In our internal
use cases, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
And in our derived artifacts, we've run into like when we do test case generation.
Sure.
We now have to. This might be an interesting sidebar.
Yeah.
Our test case generation, we actually have one agent that enumerates kind of interesting cases to test, anywhere from 1 to 30. And then we fan out to individual agents to actually write the inputs and the outputs. And we landed on that. Our initial take on this was to have a single agent just like write 10 interesting test cases. And very rapidly, especially for larger inputs, outputs, we exhausted our context.
That makes sense.
So now we have like one person enumerate or one agent and enumerate interesting test cases, then individual agents write the detailed test case, and then we have a firewall between the agent that actually runs those test cases. And so that's why like we may generate test cases, and the first time you run them, they fail, and they fail because we're doing like we're doing it properly.
Right. Okay. And you don't want the person running the test to know what the result is. Of course, that makes sense. And on the first part about feeding it to multiple agents to implement each test, are you feeding like essentially the entire outline? It's like, you do number 3.
Yeah.
Okay, basically. Yeah. Okay. So it's simple. Interesting. Let's see. Let's talk about, so we've talked about that. Let's talk about, we've talked about speed and quality extensively. Can we just talk about what's going on in the technology world right now in AI? We're on an exponential path of just releases.
December was a huge month.
I can't believe even Christmas Day.
Yes. Yeah.
Like
it was nonstop.
Do not go on vacation. You're going to miss fundamental stuff. Speaking of like DeepSeek out of nowhere, right? Which is intellectually very interesting for a lot of reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. And he can't even answer all the questions because of censorship. And I mean, it's
Yeah.
all sorts of, and the training cost rumors.
That's like a whole interesting thing. Like the source of your foundation model may start influencing whether or not you use it.
Hugely. Then you've got really good momentum forward open source on coding standards, which are going to be relevant for what you're doing. VO2, I don't know if you played, I have access to VO2, the trusted tester Google video. It's mind-blowingly good.
Yeah.
The quality would fool any reasonable person. This is real video footage. There's no question about it. Unlike previous generations of like, I was pretty good. Like 80% of the time I could tell something was AI generated image with the VO2. I mean, and so that just came out. That's not even out yet. It just was announced. What are some of the things that have most impressed you and do you ever worry doing a startup? Like you're 9 months in, 9 months from now, you could be like, oh, whoops. Like everything we built last year is one prompt away in this new thing.
Yeah.
03.
I mean, fortunately so far we've built to be kind of foundation model agnostic. And so whenever there's these improvements, we've just kind of gotten to take advantage of them. Like,
but does your whole company get done in one shot and I pay OpenAI $2,000 to run for 15 minutes? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I don't think so.
I ask the hard questions.
Yeah. In that if you're trying to productionize any kind of business workflow, you're going to want rigor around, like you're going to want backtesting. You're going to want like versioning. You're going to want to be able to roll back. You're going to want like access control over, who can approve schema changes versus who can approve content changes.
Okay.
Uh, like kind of all the rigor around that process changing. That's really where our value is.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And certainly companies could move into that. And I think we're starting to see some startups get into that.
Is there an analogy between like what happened with like, I don't know, going from like horses to cars and building highways and stuff? Are we just so early that it's hard for us to see? Because that worry of like, I'm just going to, the next reasoning gets to a tipping point where it's like, I can, self-improve and I can run like all this stuff that you're doing, that you're a smart guy and you've got a great team are doing, it will just do out of the box and it'll run its own code. And like, so therefore your customer can access that. Like, do you think about that stuff? Do you care about it? Or do you have a strategy that says, no, we're going to be okay? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily have a great answer here yet.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough to, you can't predict the future. I'm feeling pretty good about where we're at.
But is there an analogy for like other technology, disruptive technology revolutions where it was like, in the end, it was okay. Like we didn't, like, I remember when the internet came, it was like, oh, I don't know, like maybe the wallet will be baked into the browser. Why do we need to have PayPal? Like, why do we, when it's early enough, you don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if an analogy comes to mind. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So back to the like things that have been released that have been impressive that you're like, oh, we need to go and like take advantage of that or look into it.
Yeah.
And obviously a lot has happened. I think maybe if you go back 6 months in multimodal, for example, you're talking about ingesting things. And that's got to be on your radar. Are you using multimodal models to do your processing now?
Yeah. So you
mentioned PDF ingestion. So take me down to like detail level there. Like, how do you approach understanding a PDF?
Yeah. So what
charts and graphs and things that might be in there?
Yeah. So especially business documents, they tend to have like tables, figures, charts, the visual components that might have logos.
Do you get any there to like scan in and fill out by hand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah. And so the kind of naive approach of, which will get you pretty good mileage of just giving the raw image to the foundation model will do pretty good. We've gotten a lot of mileage from doing some pre-processing and various like OCR techniques and there's tools out there like with special models for extracting tables from documents, like table-oriented models. There's actually a really awesome project that I think was trending on GitHub just a week or two ago called Docling, DOCLING. And let me see if I can pull that up real quick.
Cool.
Docling. And this, like, if you're sending any documents or images to an LLM, I would highly recommend you run it through this first.
What are the competing tools that might have been around before Docling that you'd tried? And I'm just trying to understand I'm going to establish where is Docling in this set of, because there's a hodgepodge of techniques and tools and open source, right?
Yeah.
Where does this sit? What made it stand out for you?
Just the ergonomics. Like this is actually just leveraging a bunch of other tools underneath the scenes, like a bunch of different Hugging Face models. It's just it just brings together a bunch of existing technologies in a really nice ergonomic package.
Okay. Wow. PDF, DocX, PowerPoint, Excel. They're doing a lot more than just PDF.
Yes.
They're a document.
Yeah.
And they're wrapping a lot of other libraries and best practices. They probably have a router or some other stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. And then you got the support of the community to sort of like make it better.
Right. And let me see if so here's an example of,
does it handle chunking and vector indexing of long documents too?
No, it's purely just, so like here's a sample invoice. You send this over to Docling. I already have the output up here and it'll convert it to like a nice, just markdown formatted, chunk of text that you can embed in your LLM, and LLMs, I think I mentioned earlier, like love markdown. And so whenever we give an LLM an image, we'll also kind of pre-process it and give it kind of a textual.
Okay. So you're not outsourcing to Docling. You could, that would be a naive approach, but you're saying no, use Docling to create structured text extracted from lots of document formats, but also pass in the original.
This is complementary to providing the image. It's not.
When you say providing the image, are you like just the graphs and image data within a PDF,
No,
or the screenshot?
so if you give us a PDF
Yeah.
with 20 pages, we convert it to 20 images and
Wow.
send all the images. Yeah.
I like it's such an elegant approach. It's like just works, screenshot every page, run it through Dockling, put
Yeah.
those two together, and that works.
Yeah. And it'll reconcile.
When I say and that works, have you like sort of scientifically measured the quality output of that approach versus bespoke approaches or things that people were tinkering with, a year ago?
Yeah. I mean, we measured the output quality.
Yeah. Are there benchmarks for PDF extraction at this point? Like the public benchmarks?
Oh,
that people run
in that sense, like in terms of
tools,
like publishing a paper on quality, no, I don't think we've done benchmarks of that rigor. Mostly it's just like our customer has a problem. Here's one solution that solves it. Oh, we changed that solution. Is this better? And
because ultimately you're trying to like get to human quality. Like if a human was tasked with doing this SOP with the .pdf all day long, how many mistakes would they make? And can your approach be better than that?
Yeah. And one of the like really interesting data points that we just got a week or so ago is one of the use cases that we're in production for has to do with it's e-commerce related inventory moderation. And the humans working on the task would make kind of gross mistakes, large mistakes in about 24% of use cases. And we found that the LLM would make mistakes in about 2% of use cases. So it's huge reduction in rate of error. And that was based on a human expert eval. So just looking at hundreds of examples, having that analyzed by the human. And the CEO was kind of in such disbelief at that number that we did a second human eval with the CEO as the evaluator, and the result was replicated. So when we do kind of analysis, that's typically, sometimes we'll use GPT-4o as a judge, or we'll use a human as a judge.
Very cool. Have you tried just going through other things that have come out? Anthropic computer use, MCP. Have you used the new real-time voice APIs or just enhanced voice?
Quick
OpenAI.
dabble with a few of them real briefly. MCP. Yeah, and in fact, we did a series of blog posts over the holidays, and one of them is on MCP and kind of how to set it up. And we've been thinking, we just started kind of as part of our like third-party integration strategy, getting into MCP would be really nice, because imagine you're just talking with Claude, and like Claude can just like call out to different documents, like business logic documents.
It might be a place that business customers get to is just using Claude as an interface.
Yeah.
And then you could auth them into your system or whatever it is.
MCP is quite nice. I'm bullish on MCP.
Yeah, it's a really nice design. Have you seen any other products implement it yet? Or other competing entities use it as a standard? Will it become a universal standard?
Yeah, right now the number of integrations is pretty tiny. I will give a shout out to EverArt, which is founded by a former colleague of mine from Brex. They just launched an MCP integration. I suspect over the next 3 to 6 months, we'll see an explosion of MCP integrations, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, very cool. Is there anything else you want to show? Anything else you're tinkering on? What other side project you got going on, Steve?
Yeah, I think one other. So like we talked about like transactional workflows.
Yeah.
And then we talked about, or the transactional use case. Then we talked about the pick one spot, which is kind of a predefined workflow. But we haven't really discussed like fully autonomous agents yet. And that's something behind the scenes at Logic, we're always kind of tinkering with more complex workflows and more complex agents. And over time, we plan to make those more accessible to our customers.
What's an example of one that you've played with?
Yeah, so I'll show you. So we have this is an in-house agent that we built. We call it Party, programmatic artificial developer, and this is kind of in response to, just like we have. We use AI to like write our commit messages, and we have AI to review our code. We also want AI to help us write our code. And I think just like many developers today, we use Cursor, Aider, if you're in Vim, Code Companion. But I've found, especially on the open source side, the quality of coding agents is way behind like the latest of Cursor and Devin, and so we've just been experimenting with like building an open source coding agent.
And it works at the terminal.
So it's like 100% terminal.
Show us.
Yeah. So let's see. Let's just make like a,
Is the idea though that I would fire this up in an existing repo, or
yeah, so it can work.
either way?
So this is designed to work against the logic code base. So we can give it,
Okay.
we use linear for task management. We can give it a linear task and it'll go and implement it, but we'll
Oh,
just do something
wow.
from scratch here.
Okay.
So I'll create a directory called,
And this, do you plan to open source this? Just getting to the, I
Yeah.
want to play with it too.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
um,
Will it use logic on the back end to implement itself, or is this too?
so right now it's
independent?
fully self-contained.
Okay.
If we GA logic before we open source this, there will probably be some kind of logic integration.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't think there's no universe where logic would be mandated. You
Okay.
know? So we'll give it a project root of test tic-tac-toe. We'll give it a description of implement a simple tic-tac-toe game from scratch. Set up Git and npm and everything. Give it a simple though static append-only.
Okay.
And so one of the things this agent can do is execute commands on your behalf,
Sure.
and by default we have it ask you if it can run the command.
Sure.
But I'm going to run with no fear mode.
You're brave.
And just let it loose in my terminal.
Okay. And it's telling you what it's doing here. It's basically installing all the things it's going to need to create this project.
Yeah, and so this is actually broken down into 3 sub-agents.
Mhm.
The first agent is a planner,
Mhm.
and it can only list directories
Mhm.
and read files. That's
Mhm.
all it can do. So
Cool.
this is going to crawl the code base. This is a simple one. It's an empty directory.
Mhm.
So it listed the directory, and just based on the amount of time it's taking for this response, it's now coming up with a plan.
Yep.
To turn this empty directory into a tic-tac-toe
Nice.
game. And so this is the detailed step-by-step plan. Then we have
Cool.
another agent that will review and revise this plan.
Mhm.
Wow. And then once it's reviewed, so the plan provides a comprehensive guide. So the reviewer signed off on it. Now it gets passed to a third agent that is an engineer that actually implements it. And the engineer has additional tools. This is the engineer that can actually run commands.
Are they going to write tests also?
It might, if we ask it to write tests, it would.
There,
So you can see, here it's like initializing a Git repo, adding node modules to our Git ignore, initializing npm.
Nice. How does
Right.
this compare to like OpenDevin or something? Do you know?
I haven't done like a head-to-head comparison, or like I haven't done a rigorous comparison.
In the approach of how it manifests to you as a user or a developer.
I'll say the open source agent or like coding agent that I spent the most. Oh, and well, here we go. We have tic-tac-toe,
Cool.
and and so
the game board's a little
it's a little wonky, but we could have it revise that.
Yeah. Is it still in a loop where you could actually give it feedback?
There's no
Not yet.
interactivity where this is at right now, but I could change the description to say like
so if you run a new description here, it's going to be okay, but I need to look at the code base I'm in already.
So let's do that. Make it a lot
that's
more
really cool.
Beautiful.
How in today's world of this implementation, with a very large code base, what would it do?
So that's kind of the neat thing. So the agent right now, when it runs, it has no pre-existing context on the code base. And so everything it gathers, it just gathers by crawling the code base and listing directories and reading files.
Do you have a step where you're going to vector index that and do all that stuff?
There's a counterpart where there's a counter. No, so there's a secondary project that we're working on that actually indexes your code base for you. And actually
really cool.
Comes up with it. Not only will index the content of your code, but it'll actually look at your Git log and find like, oh, these files tend to be modified together, and like, oh, you use these patterns, and like every time you check in code, you add tests.
So if you do that, and then the last thing you just need is a VS Code plugin of some kind. Then we're done. We've got an open source that's really cool.
And so just while this is wrapping up, we can just hop in here and we can
that's super.
I'll just cat this instead of open it up. So simple, this is a very simple kind of toy example, but it looks like it completed, and it just added everything to Git. If we hop over to Git and we look at our log, we should see 2 commits now.
Nice.
And if we refresh, it's a
there
little
you
nicer.
go. Nice. It's a little better. Try harder.
Yeah.
Put the lines. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Hey, you were you? Correct me if I'm wrong. When we met, you were like a Ruby on Rails guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then now, are you doing Ruby on Rails at all anymore?
No, I mean,
What do you guys use?
I have nostalgia for it.
Fine, but what do you use for like your production right now? For building the web
everything's
UI?
TypeScript. I'm all in on TypeScript.
Okay.
We
And
just because of
backend
the ecosystem, sometimes sorry,
backend everything's TypeScript.
end-to-end TypeScript.
Okay.
We because of the tooling ecosystem,
Yeah.
like Dockling, we have started incorporating Python into some places,
Okay.
but we really keep Python kind of isolated.
You run it as
It's
a
just a
process,
process,
somehow.
yeah.
You ever run servers that are running stuff in Python?
No.
Like you're not using any third party.
No, the Python runs as like part of a work queue. It's just like a binary that we call out to.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Yeah.
And that's just so you can get things like Dockling or whatever that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Because for better or worse, so much of the ecosystem, that data science and like machine learning ecosystem is in Python.
Yeah. I'm doing everything that I do is in Ruby on Rails still. And I bridge over via APIs.
Yeah.
So I haven't had a need to do, I do lots of like library incorporation that is based on Python somewhere on the hood.
Yeah.
Like you, I keep it contained.
Yeah. I haven't, Ruby back in like, this would have been like 2010, 2012, with like Haml and CoffeeScript and all that good stuff. I occasionally miss it. There are things that Rails still does better than anybody else. And
I think the thing for me, I think one of the most compelling reasons probably, although the languages models don't seem to care, a lot of the serverless tooling, especially, but even the models themselves default to like Python world and even they're even opinionated on stuff like which CSS framework to use.
So
React is obviously like a default when output. In fact, when I feed my code base a lot of times, it's like, oh, here's, it's basically telling me you should rewrite it in React.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, please don't. Not yet.
So I actually have a draft post called New Year, New LAMP Stack, where LAMP is LLM aware methods and practices. Yeah. And so it's all about how LLMs are starting to shape our technical decisions. And like we get so much leverage from the LLM that rather than fight it and try to make it accommodate our decisions, we embrace the decisions that it is most comfortable with.
I'm excited with that philosophy. A lot of like piecing together. I think the evolution just in 2 years, where LLMs are so unreliable that you have to really constrain them. And then, if I'm creating an email, I'm going to like do it the old way. And then this one piece of dynamic content, I'm going to test the heck out of it. I'm going to insert it into that paragraph. And these days I am quickly becoming like, no, throw all that away. I'm just going to ask the really smart model. I'm going to tell it everything about my user and my goal. And I'm going to say, write the email.
Yeah.
And then decide if you send it or not. Is it appropriate? And I'm going to have a better experience for my user with more conversion or whatever it is. And I'm increasingly doing everything that way. And it makes me believe that like, well, all the crud literally that I create will be replaced with disposable software that's created and executed on the fly, including the UI components. Why wouldn't it be? At some point. And maybe not this year, but next year.
Also, this notion of it's more like kind of spec-driven development where you just kind of describe what you want to happen and you don't really care about the specifics. And I think one of the interesting divides that we'll start to see kind of bifurcate more and more as time progresses is like companies that had code bases that existed before 2023 and companies that created code bases after 2023, where like the way you structure your code base, the technical decisions you make, anybody creating a new code base today is probably going to structure it, if you're making it friendly for LLMs, probably going to structure it very differently. And you kind of get into this.
What some of those components you think would be?
Everything from the size of your files. Like you no longer want single files that are 10,000 lines long. Not that you ever wanted this, but like you certainly don't want a single source file that's like 10,000 lines long. The libraries that you're using, the naming conventions. Like if you have the LLM working in your code base and it starts hallucinating methods or variables, that's probably a sign that your code isn't readable. So implement those methods, implement those variables, because the LLM's assuming they should exist. More times than not, they should exist, and your code base will be better for it. Any kind of libraries that it's using, training data. So like a lot of the benchmarks are Python, but a lot of the models work really well with Python or JavaScript. That could have to do with the underlying training data. But it kind of harkens back to like the way we build factories. Like if you have an existing factory and you want to add automation to it, you kind of need to adapt the machines to the factory.
Right.
Whereas like if you're building a new factory from scratch, you can change the factory to work with the machines.
Yep.
And I think you see that same divide with
Mhm.
new versus old code bases, where you can just make
Mhm.
your new code base work with the machines.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for new companies to come in and be able to move faster because they architect them in a way that will allow them to naturally move faster.
Yeah, I mean, it's like our 4-person team. It feels like we're doing the work of like a 20 to 30-person team. We
Mhm.
just like I 3 years ago, I could not have imagined the level of productivity that we'd have.
Yeah, very cool. It's awesome. I love what you're doing. Thanks for joining us today. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
I think that's it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve.
Yeah,
This is
thank you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.